Is William Carey, who is considered as the father of modern missions, the father of modern India? That's a question that we are going to ponder today. Welcome to SAF Podcast, and I'm delighted that you are joining us here. And this is going to be a very exciting and interesting conversation for us to dive in. In fact, this is the start of many conversations that are about to follow, where we will look at specifically the Indian context. We had looked at the interplay of God in the Eastern culture with Jacob Cherian in the past, but this is going to be very specific to the Indian context, and we hope to carry this forward in the subsequent podcast episodes as well. And to start this very strategic focus into India is a guest who needs very little introduction. We are so delighted to have the renowned Dr. Vishal Mangalwadi with us. So welcome to SAF Podcast for the very first time.
Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate the honor.
Now, I know that he's quite popular and familiar to our audience, but if you're coming across him for the first time, let me give you a quick bio about who he is. He is a philosopher, an author, speaker, a social reformer, and the founder-president of the Revelation Movement. In fact, along with his wife Ruth, he founded a community to serve the rural poor in India. And he has authored over 25 books and spoken at over 50 countries. And I got to know most about him when I learned that he was featured on Jordan B. Peterson's podcast. And the book that put him on my radar in the past few years was one of his most impactful work, the book that made your world, How the Bible Created the Soul of Western Civilization. In fact, his writing career started way back in 1977 when he wrote his first book, The World of Gurus. And today we are going to talk about one of his most recent, and I would say a much more intriguing thesis as well, the book that is titled The Father of Modern India, William Carey. Now that is in some sense quite controversial, as some would want to look at it. The claim that a foreign missionary is the father of modern India. And there is a whole lot for us to unpack. Definitely the book is where I would encourage our audience to turn to. You can find the details and the link in the description to get hold of it. But today, hopefully, we will try and get to introduce the thesis of the book and some of the questions that you may be having in your mind, just as I had when I came across the book itself. So to jump right into the meat of the dialogue, what is the central thesis of the book, to introduce it to someone who is coming across the book for the very first time?
The central thesis of the book, now called The Father of Modern India, William Carey, is that William Carey, a cobbler, English cobbler, who became a linguist, came to India to translate and publish the Bible in Indian language. His focus initially was Bengali, which broadened to include 30, 40 other languages. This mission to rebuild the Bible, rebuild modern India, on the foundations of the Bible is, in fact, he is the father of modern India, even though the Western church historians see him as father of modern missions, but that is because they don't know Indian history, and you have to know sufficient Indian history to answer the question, who really is the father of modern India, and what do we mean by modern India? And the non-Christian historians definitely have, Hindu historians, Muslim historians, it's emotionally very difficult for them to admit that a Christian missionary who did not even go to a university, he is the father of modern India. And Christians in India, since Christianity, the Protestant movement, abandoned university. It brought the university movement to India. We abandoned university. The church became victim of the corruption of theology in the West. So the Indian church was not interested in writing its history. In the seminaries, when church history is taught, nobody teaches the relationship of the gospel to the shaping of modern India. The church history means the history of Christian denominations, Protestant denominations. So the book is unique in that it is putting. It is just the beginning. I have several other books that follow this. It's just the beginning of William Carey came, Bible began to be translated, Bible began to be published. What did all of this do to change India? So, and the answer is that the Bible created modern India. So we are ready to publish a whole series of books. We have at least 40 chapters right now, which will constitute 3 volumes on how the Bible created modern India. So this was the very beginning. We began, Ruth and I began to look at William Carey in 1987, and in 92, we realized that 93 will be the 200th anniversary of his arrival in India. Therefore, it would be appropriate for us to publish all the research that we had already done into a book. So it was not conceived or written as a book. It was lectures and chapters, papers that Ruth and I were giving and reading, and I will tell you some of that story later. So it is really a collection of various papers and lectures that we had given.
Oh, well, that's a very intriguing turn of events, how it came about. And as you mentioned, how historians in the West are unaware of Indian history and therefore they are left in the dark about William Carey's contribution. I think that charge can be levied on many Indian Christians as well. Even I myself was completely ignorant about William Carey's impact on modern India. I too just knew him as the father of modern missions. And so there is a lot of upliftment, educational upliftment that needs to be done among Indian Christians for us to be aware about the overwhelming impact that Christian missionaries have had in India. And speaking about the aspect of the term modern India, Raja Ram Mohan Roy is widely considered to be the father of modern India. So now as we get into the crux of William Carey's contribution, one thing that would need a bit of a clarification is what is generally understood by the term as father of modern India? Because we know what we mean when we say Mahatma Gandhi is the father of the nation. That is very clear to us. But when it is generally said that Raja Ram Mohan Roy is the father of modern India, what is that generally meant to understand?
Well, it is calling Raja Ram Mohan Roy the father of modern India is actually just a statement that he is the first Indian to agree and support the mission, the campaign that people like William Carey, Alexander Duff, etc., had already started. So he supported Indian Renaissance and became a critic of Hinduism, challenging many aspects. So there was a Tantric Baba who was a good Sanskrit scholar. He took Ram Mohan Roy as a young man to study English from William Carey. And William Carey wanted to learn Sanskrit, so they had this agreement that Ram Mohan Roy will help Carey improve his knowledge of Sanskrit, because Ram Mohan Roy was a good Sanskrit scholar, and Carey will teach him English. So they became friends together, the three of them, including the Tantric Baba. They wrote the first book, which is not talked about, which was actually the first book on Indian law. Because the East India Company had acquired a governing authority in 1764 or so. The Bengal's administration or Diwani had been given to East India Company. They were governing, they were judges, but how do you judge a case that is a dispute between Hindus? A Hindu says he's following his tradition. What is his tradition? What is Hindu law? At that point, there was no book on Hindu law. Manusmriti had existed, but it was not printed. Manusmriti had been translated into English in 1794, just 1 year after Carey landed in Bengal. Manusmriti had been translated, but not printed. It wasn't available.
Right.
There were handwritten copies circulating amongst Indologists. So an average English judge who is deciding a case has no idea of what law, because this is still Mughal Empire. But the Mughals are not enthusiastic about Sharia. But at least the Muslims have their Sharia law with many different interpretations. But Sharia law exists. There is no Indian penal code. It's the Lord Macaulay who comes in later in the 30s and in 40s. He writes 1840s. He writes the Indian Penal Code. So it is William Carey, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and this Tantrik Baba. Three of them create what was the first attempt to Hindu law. Now, Carey drove the movement. It was the inspiration to create this law. But it was that Hindu law created by three of them which actually made the Tagore family very wealthy, because Rabindranath Tagore's father and uncles, they were able to use their knowledge of the Hindu law as codified by William Carey and Ram Mohan Roy to fight court cases. So the judges would listen to them because they are. Of course, Carey had a agenda behind that law, besides helping helping the judicial system, a new judicial system of East India Company. His agenda was that he wanted to prove that Hindu law does not require sati. It condones sati, but the sati is not part of Hindu law. And that is what also helped shape Ram Mohan Roy. Now, later, so this was before William Carey settled in Serampur, that's 1801 or 1800. So the two of them had been studying together and creating this book together. But after Carey moved to Serampur, Ram Mohan Roy returned to Serampur to begin helping them translate the Bible. And it was while he was helping, there was a Scottish translator, Adam something, when Ram Mohan Roy was helping him translate the New Testament, the Gospel of John. That's when the two of them, Adam and Ram Mohan Roy, began to be attracted towards modism. That is, not modism, Unitarianism. Unitarianism. Right, yes. That is the New Testament, the Gospel of John, teaching Trinity. So Unitarians had been winning Harvard. 1805 was when Harvard was won by the Unitarians, Oxford, Cambridge. So the intellectual elite opinion because of rationalism in England and America had been shifting towards Unitarianism. And Adam and Ram Mohan Roy, while he's living in Serampur, they become Unitarian. So then Adam has to resign from his position with Serampur Mission. And the two of them relocated to Calcutta. where there was sufficient number of important British English civil servants. They were not English civil servants, they were still servants of East India Company. These people started the Unitarian Society of Calcutta, which later, once Adam moved back out of India, later it was called Brahma Samaj. So the Brahma Samaj of Tagore and Ram Mohan Roy came out of Sirampur mission. So all the agenda of social reform that Ram Mohan Roy championed was copying what William Carey had already done. So the intellectual foundations were all there had been all laid in Sirampur and before, because Ram Mohan Roy had spent time with William Carey learning English while he was still with the indigo plantations in somewhere north of Sirampur, so northeast. When people say that Ram Mohan Roy is the father of modern India, they mean that he's the first educated, learned Hindu who begins to say that, yes, India must change. Idol worship, he saw idol worship as the greatest evil in India, Ram Mohan Roy. Caste is evil, untouchability is evil, and theism, he begins to promote theism. So in Brahma Samaj, they would observe Sunday worship, but they would preach from the Bible, a Unitarian version of. So Brahma Samaj, and that continued. Mahatma Gandhi was preaching from the Bible in his prayer meetings. After Gandhi, Vinoba Bhave in Sarvodaya, he was regularly preaching on Sundays in Sarvodaya movement from the Bible. So what Ram Mohan Roy was doing was all the flowering of the seeds. So he was taking all the good things that he had learned from William Carey and his team and begun to implement, including education. So when he relocates to Calcutta, he decides to start the Calcutta College, which so that idea that the mission should be educating. So the schools had already begun, and the college was starting in Sirampur. But in Sirampur, the Sirampur College was the first Asian language college. It was the first college in whole of Asia which was using vernacular to teach college level education. But Ram Mohan Roy decided to teach English. This is 20 years before Macaulay, 15, almost 20 years before Macaulay Minute, that Ram Mohan Roy starts a college in Calcutta to teach English because he knows that Indian parents will pay him for his students to learn English and prepare themselves for employment in East India Company. So commercially, Ram Mohan Roy is more interesting, but he's preparing Indians, upper caste Indians who are capable of paying high fee to study English at college level, become employees of East India Company. Whereas William Carey and his team, it was Joshua Marshman who was running the college, they insist on teaching using Bengali. Because this is a means to develop Bengali, a means to develop Bengali textbooks in Bengali, and to awaken the whole of Bengal, which includes Bangladesh, and at that time actually includes Assam and Orissa and Bihar as well. So the Bengal, before the division of Bengal, included all of the eastern part of India. So they felt that to awaken Bengal, we need to build Bengali language. But Ram Mohan Roy champions English, with and Alexander Duff supports him, and William Carey blesses them for a number of reasons that we can discuss in another question. So the simple point is that yes, Ram Mohan Roy is important player because he is the first Hindu Brahmin in Bengal who accepts William Carey's point of view and promotes it. And he's supported by a section of the East India Company that has become Unitarian.
Right. And the point about the Brahmo Samaj and its Unitarian history is quite intriguing, because I remember seeing, I don't know if you've seen this clip, it's there on YouTube. It's an artistic recreation about how the Brahmo Samaj meetings used to take place. I think it may have been from a movie, something a friend of mine showed me. And in that, the whole meeting happens in a very Protestant-like manner. There's a singing, and they come and sit down, and the next person comes up, starts to speak, and I looked at it and thought, oh wow, this looks a whole lot like how normal Protestant evangelical meetings go about. But now I know why very specifically.
Yes, so Ram Mohan Roy was made in Sirampur mission. Yes.
And as you were listing out the impact that Raja Ram Mohan Roy had, the very unique space that he was in as a person, as you mentioned, learned Hindu to impact India. What I'm sensing from the thesis is that the title of Father of Modern India is uniquely attributable to William Carey, even though Raja Ram Mohan Roy played a part. Or do you think that there was certain reforms and certain impacts that Raja Ram Mohan Roy himself pioneered, areas into which Carey did not dabble in?
Well, we need someone to do a good PhD level research on that, because when I was researching, I was in North India. I was an activist. I was not a full-time researcher. I didn't have access to books and libraries. But right now, a lot more information is available. Like, I've never heard of this video clip that you mentioned about what actually happened in Brahma Samaj. So we need a PhD level research in Ram Mohan Roy and the origins of Indian, as it's called, Indian Renaissance, which is Indians themselves accepting English ideas. But for that very reason, Ram Mohan Roy is hated by Hindutva. So if you Google, I mean, on YouTube and Google, if you begin to read about what the Hindutva movement is saying, when we were young, when I was in college and university, that's 50 years ago, yes, Ram Mohan Roy was championed as the father of modern India. But today, the Hindutva movement would kill him for apostasy. There would be a Hindu fatwa against him that he corrupted Hinduism, that he injected Christian ideas, although he had become Unitarian. But when Ram Mohan Roy went to England, for example, he was promoted in the British press as a Unitarian Christian. So the English press received him and promoted him as a Unitarian Christian who is using indigenous names. So he's trying to indigenize, and this is because some of the learned people in East India Company told him that, look, William Carey, John Calvin, these Protestant reformers reformed England not by attacking Christ and the Bible, but by reinterpreting the Bible, Christ, Christianity, salvation. So if you want to reform India, you have to reinterpret Vedas and Upanishads and Hindu scriptures So he is a Protestant Hindu who is trying to reform Hinduism from within, but in fact, all his ideas are coming from the Bible.
That Protestant angle to it is, yeah, I know it will definitely upset a lot of feathers out there. But
Well,
as you were
no,
mentioning,
actually, today I think a lot of Hindus will accept it because Hindus hate Ram Mohan Roy, the educated Hindus, Hindutva movement. They hate Raja Ram Mohan Roy as much as they hate William Carey.
no, I'm not an expert on Ram Mohan Roy or even Swami Vivekananda. But from my very limited knowledge, I recall that Vivekananda also spoke against idol worship to some extent, and he also
Oh, no,
had.
he saw idol worship as India's biggest sin, biggest problem.
And so how is it? I know we may be going off topic a bit, but I would just want to make the small deviation here. How do you know modern Hindutva community look at Vivekananda when they contrast with Raja Ram Mohan Roy? Because there is the same reformist mentality, but they hold Vivekananda to a much higher standard. They esteem him highly. So what is the main reason for that mismatch? Is it because of Raja Ram
Well,
Mohan Roy's Unitarian stance?
no, this is because Ram Mohan Roy and Keshav Chandra Sen, etc., are seen by Hindu intellectuals as crypto-Christians. They're hidden Christians who are dressing up Christianity in Hindu clothes. It is, you're giving the gospel, but you're giving it in an Indian cup. But Vivekananda is doing the opposite. He is
Right.
taking Hinduism, a version of monistic Hinduism and Tantra, to the West. And so while Ram Mohan Roy is bringing Christianity to India in Hindu garbs, like contextualized Christianity, but Unitarian Christianity, Vivekananda is taking Hinduism in Western garbs and
Right.
making Tantra and monism and yoga, etc., acceptable to the West.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, as you were talking about one of the key impacts that William Carey had, and one of the key areas of their collaboration was specifically as it pertained to the abolition of Sati, getting the Manusmriti out there and into the hands of the legal system to bring about an end towards Sati. What other new information did you come across as you were researching about William Carey's impact and work in Sati that is not really known out in the public?
Well, William Carey witnessed Sati firsthand in about 1803, may have been 1806, when he was returning from Calcutta, Fort William College, in the boat to Sirampur. He saw this incident of Sati being dragged to be burned. And he stopped the boat, got out, and tried to prevent that. He failed. And that's when he decided that if the Lord gives him health, he will fight this abomination, which was a devout religious practice. He saw it as an abomination, violating God's command, you shall not kill. A widow who needs to be served, helped, assisted to restart her life as a human being, she's being killed in the name of religion. So he began researching the issue of Sati. This is William Carey, began researching. He set up 30 researchers all across Calcutta district, outskirts of Calcutta, to report every incident of Sati to him, which he would compile and send to influential Christians, including William Wilberforce, who was a member of parliament who never came to India. So he then wrote a very well-researched paper. William Carey realized that the East India Company, it's not a missionary movement. It's not going to interfere with Hindu religious traditions, such as Sati, because at that moment, in a popular level, it's part of a religious virtue, a religious tradition. So he had to argue that Hindu law does not require a sati to be burnt. This is extra Hindu legal system. It's a tradition, evil tradition. This has nothing to do with intrinsic nature of Hinduism. So William Ram Mohan Roy was with Carey studying some of these things. So William Carey published his paper, which became the central document inside of British Parliament. So as early as 1806 or so, the Governor General was ready because of Carey's paper that has been discussed by members of Parliament, that yes, this is an abomination that should be legally stopped. So Governor General was ready, but Governor General was transferred. I give the details of the names and dates in my book. He was transferred. So the legislation was never the edict was never enacted. In 1812, Ram Mohan Roy's sister-in-law, his brother's wife, she was forced to commit sati. And Ram Mohan Roy saw that. And he loved his sister-in-law. He was affectionately involved with her. And he hated sati, but he didn't know what to do about it. So he joined the campaign that Carey had already started a decade earlier in saying, yes, this is an evil religious tradition which should be abolished. So in 1829, William Bentinck finally accepts the recommendation that sati should be abolished through an edict. So he passes the edict, sends it to Carey on Saturday night, Sunday morning, to be translated into Bengali so that it is can be published throughout Bengal, because East India Company is governing mostly Bengal at that point, and a few other parts. But so the edict is passed. Hindu scholars then challenge the edict that this is interference with our religious system, and the East India Company has never been given the authority. The Mughal Empire has never banned sati. Mughal have given the administrative authority of Diwani to the company, but that authority does not include the right to interfere with Hindu religious traditions. So today you're banning sati, tomorrow you can ban idol worship. This is not an authority that the Mughal is exercising, and this is not an authority that the company has been given. This is sacred tradition to us. The East India Company should not meddle with our religious traditions. So they appealed. They had to go above the Governor General. So they appealed to Privy Council, and then they were invited to England to present their case in defense of sati. Now, it so happened that when these delegation of the Hindu leaders went to England, London, to defend sati and oppose the edict against widow burning, the Ram Mohan Roy was already there in England. He had just reached there. And it was known that Ram Mohan Roy is an opponent of Sati. So Ram Mohan Roy was invited by anti-Sati lobby to speak, to counter these Hindu delegation. So this was the final phase. The Governor General has already banned Sati through an edict. Hindus have appealed against that edict. Ram Mohan Roy happens to be in London, and he's invited to defend the edict against these Hindu scholars. And that debate, the British press champions that here is a learned scholar. But now you remember that all the arguments that Ram Mohan Roy has been given, he has already hammered those out with William Carey,
Right.
under Carey's guidance, while he has worked with Carey twice, before Sirampur and in Sirampur as a Bible translator. So the arguments of William Carey, Carey is in India, but Ram Mohan Roy is in England, and the press in England begins to credit, yes, we should ban this widow burning because here is a learned Hindu scholar who knows Hinduism, who knows Sanskrit. He is saying that this Hindu delegation is wrong. Sati is not part of Hindu religious system. So that's how the media, because of the English media covering Ram Mohan Roy's defense of the ban on Sati, which Ram Mohan Roy didn't play any role in that, except that after his sister-in-law's burning alive, he personally, emotionally got really angry at the whole tradition of Sati. So yes, the textbooks give a lot of credit to Ram Mohan Roy, and he deserves the credit for being a learned Indian who stood up against Sati. But he wasn't the force, he was the lawyer presenting Carey's arguments and the governor's arguments before the British public, before Privy Council.
Wow, that is a fascinating page in history that we don't really come across in our learning of the matter in normal history textbooks. And as you were mentioning about Carey's impact specifically in this context about Sati, you also go about in your book, you venture to show the different hats that William Carey had donned as a botanist and as a linguist. Now we have passed our halfway mark, and I want to try and cover as much ground as possible. So this may be a big question to ask, but to our audience base, including myself, who's not fully aware about Carey's amazing impact, how has his contribution in his roles as a botanist and as a linguist advanced his case as the father of modern India?
Well, human species is the only culture-creating species. We create culture because we speak. Language is the greatest gift to our species because language is logical arrangements of words, sounds. So logic is part of language.
Right.
An illogical sentence is nonsense. So we're not just making sounds, we are conveying ideas. Word is sense, sound with sense. Mantra is sound from which sense is being severed, cut off. So a culture can develop only as far as its language will take it.
Right.
A Stone Age culture, Stone Age tribe, you can't teach mathematics or engineering or medicine or heart surgery to them because they don't have the language, the vocabulary. So the beginning with the Exodus, 10 Commandments, Hebrews are slaves. They've come out of Egypt. They're shepherds to feed their bellies, but they're brickmakers just to stay alive. Otherwise, they'll be beaten. They are illiterate. God gives them a written text. God doesn't tell them stories. God gives them a written text written in the tablets of stones. If God has given you a written text, you have to read it. And God makes it difficult. He says you have to copy it. So you have to write. They say we don't have pen and paper. Where are we going to copy it? God says you write it on your walls, on your doorpost, on your clothes. Oh, our women stitch our clothes. They knit our clothes. Then teach your women to write. So you have to learn to read, to write. Pharaoh has made you slaves. I want you to be thinkers and professors. You must teach the law, apply it to all of life. So this intellectual development of reading, writing, thinking, applying, teaching the word of God. If you do this, you will be a wise people. You will become a great nation. So the whole blessing that you follow me, Abraham, I will bless you. I will make you a great nation. This is not numerical greatness. Israel was never a numerically very large country. Even today, there are only about 14 million Jews all over the earth. In Israel, about 7 million. Whereas India alone has 1.4 billion people. So Israel was never a great nation numerically, and our Sunday school teachers don't know that. But God says to Abraham, God says 400 years later through Moses, that if you obey this, if you teach these laws, then you will be a great nation. But that law has to be taught in the heart language of the people. So when William Carey is there in Bengal, court language of India is Persian. There are three classical languages in India: Persian, Arabic, and Sanskrit. Sanskrit, even today, only 25,000 people all over the world speak Sanskrit. Sanskrit never became the mother tongue. It is a developed, sophisticated language. But Sanskrit never became the mother tongue of Brahmins because Brahmins would not teach Sanskrit to their wives. Women cannot learn Sanskrit. If mother doesn't know Sanskrit, the child, it doesn't become the child's language. So Arabic was language of the Islam, and you're reading the Quran in Arabic. Persian was the court language since the days of Humayun, particularly Akbar and Shah Jahan. So Persian is the court language, even though court servants in the Mughal Empire don't really know Persian. So if India has to be transformed, if the intellectual development of India has to happen, William Carey sees that the first need, more than education, more than IITs, more than medical colleges, the first need is to develop Indian languages. And so you begin to develop Indian languages through Bible translation, because that is what had happened at the Reformation in 250 years earlier. That Martin Luther, when he is starting to reform Germany, he translates the New Testament into German, the heart language of the people. Otherwise, at that point, anyone in Europe, Western Europe, who wants to study the Bible, read the Bible, has to first learn Latin. Because Latin Bible had existed since Jerome, but so a Bible translator he builds an intellectual bridge. Once you have translated Bible into Bengali or Hindi or Gujarati or Malayalam, then you've built a bridge on which literature can be translated, law can be translated, science, mathematics, engineering, medicine, everything people can have access to because you've built the bridge. So translating the Bible into the mother tongue of the people is the first step to reform. Now, the Protestant theology has become so corrupt that Protestant theologians do not understand that a great feature of the Protestant Reformation was linguistic revolution. All the European languages, English, there was no English literature. Wycliffe creates English, medieval English, through translation of the Bible into English. And for that, he is excommunicated and declared a heretic eventually after his death. Tyndale creates modern English through Bible translation, but no bishop in England would allow him to translate the Bible. He has to become a fugitive, goes to Wittenberg to sit under Luther to translate the Bible into English. Then he has to print it secretly in Belgium and smuggle it into England to begin English Reformation. And for that crime of translating the Bible into English, he paid with his life. He was strangled and burnt alive. But this is the linguistic reformation of Europe, is what created modern Europe. It was Latin, but now it is English or German or French or Italian or Scandinavian languages, etc. So the Reformation, which was a linguistic revolution, is what William Carey is bringing to India. And Dr. Babu Varghese, he's done the best study of in his book, Let There Be India, of how the Bible translators created all of modern Indian languages, including Malayalam. Malayalam didn't exist 200 years ago. It was a development out of Tamil through the efforts of Christian literature, but even modern Tamil is a work of Christian missionaries. And that's why Rajiv Malhotra and company hate those people who created modern Tamil because they want Sanskrit, but they wouldn't teach Sanskrit to their own wives, and Sanskrit would not become a mother tongue for Brahmin kids, Brahmin boys in India because of Brahmanism. But the Protestant movement is opposite. It is trying to make India a great nation, and first requirement is language. But since the time is running up, let me move to the first part of the question about botany and agriculture. William Carey is the father of modern agriculture in India. So when he first came, there was no, he was sent by a mission organization, but there was no system of mission organization paying him a salary. He has to earn his own salary. No one is paying him to translate the Bible into Bengali. So he works on an indigo factory, and he lives with the farmers. He does a fantastic research, which I read in Asiatic Journal, in Asiatic Research Library in Calcutta, a fantastic research for which he should get a PhD on agriculture, about studying the whole state of the agriculture in his district, Madinapur or Mirapur or whatever. But the important thing is that in 1820, William Carey establishes the first agri-horticultural society in Calcutta. At that time, no such society exists anywhere in the world. So there is no such society in England. England follows his example 6 months later. So he is bringing modern agriculture, plants, animals, flowers, vegetables, fruit through the agri-horticultural society. Out of that come movement, first of all, the building of dams and canals. So the Sir Arthur Cotton barrage over Godavari, which transforms that whole area of Telugu-speaking part of India into rice bowl of India. And then the Ganga Canal of making barrage over Ganga and etc. Eventually, Sam Higginbotham starts the Agricultural Institute in Allahabad at the banks of River Ganga, just upstream from Sangam. And then finally, Norman Borlaug, a Lutheran scientist who comes to become the father of modern of Green Revolution. So this whole movement from 1820 to 1970s, when Green Revolution comes, William Carey pioneers. Now, he was a Bible translator who had come to save souls. Why is he doing all of this? This is where I say that the evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic theology of the last 100 years is corruption of Protestantism. The entire development of modern science is a movement that begins with Protestantism. So William Carey is not alone. Most pastors in England at that time, most missionaries going from England, they are studying plants, they are studying animals. This is because as they take the Bible seriously, they realize that God's first command was not to go and preach the gospel. His first command was to go and name all the animals. That means categorizing animals. If you're making a difference between horse and zebra and donkey, or wolf and dog and fox, you have to know, what do these animals eat? What's the difference? The food that they eat, where does it grow? In what kind of climate? What kind of soil? So naming animals includes studying of plants, studying of soil, studying of climate, the whole of scientific development. Now, this taxonomy, modern taxonomy, begins to develop with a Scandinavian Lutheran, because after the Reformation, when the Bible is taken literally, scholars begin to realize that Adam and Eve had begun to name all the animals. They had begun this scientific taxonomy. But that knowledge was lost in Genesis 11 when the languages are confused. So all the language, the wealth, intellectual wealth that generations had been passing, that is lost. Now that the Holy Spirit has come on the day of Pentecost and that curse has been reversed, we can begin to understand each other. We need to restart the process of naming animals and naming plants. So modern taxonomy begins in Scandinavia, Stockholm, with a Lutheran. In Basel, there are two Huguenot brothers. Their father they're physicians. They take it further. So William Carey is part of a Protestant movement. Catholics, many Catholics, particularly after the Counter-Reformation, many Catholics accept that and begin to contribute to renaming, studying everything. So the idea that Jesus came to save our souls and take us to heaven is part of um, corruption of the gospel that has happened since D.L. Moody in the last 100 years. The eschatology, what will happen in end times. Will the light overcome darkness? Will the earth be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord? Or are things going to go from bad to worse? The pessimism. Christian movement was an optimistic movement. The world can be reformed. India can be reformed. This is what William Carey brings. So William Carey is a post-millennialist. He cannot be understood by an average Christian preacher in India who has accepted premillennialism that, oh, world is going to go from bad to worse, and there is going to be tribulation, and there's going to be rapture, and Christianity is about escapism. This world is not my home. I have to escape from this world. Or is Christianity God's kingdom that has come into this world so that slaves are being transformed into sons? Sonship is kingship if your father is a king. Adam and Eve were created to rule over this earth, to establish their dominion. And Hinduism, Buddhism were escaping from this world. William Carey brings a religious idea which is re-establishing human dominion over this earth. So the botanical garden, agriculture, farming in Sirampur, where all the languages are being developed and the books are being printed. And that's the second best botanical garden in India. The best is in Calcutta, which Carey is supervising, but he didn't build it. He built the Sirampur Botanical Garden, but his paper Friend of India is championing forestry in India. This is not what East India Company is interested in. This is Friend of India is interested in transforming Indian agriculture, transforming Indian botany. And so Carey himself is teaching botany. He's a linguist, a Bible translator, but he's teaching astronomy because in India, we have a culture of astrology where our times rule over us. But for us to become kings, we have to rule over our time. We have to learn to manage our time, fix our own priorities, not wait for the constellation to tell us whether to get married, whether to start a business, whether to travel. So replacing culture of astrology with a culture of astronomy, where, yes, sun, moon, stars, constellations, these are signs to help us the monotony of the universe into directions and calendar, so that we can begin to manage the world effectively as God's children, who are kings. So William Carey, as a post-millennialist, has a very different outlook than an average American or English missionary who comes here to teach us to escape from India. Don't bother with transforming India, but prepare for tribulation and prepare for your rapture. So what we have in the name of Protestantism today is really a corruption of biblical Christianity that William Carey brings to India.
Wow, and that is a very sobering reminder for us Christians, predominantly Protestant Christians, to rethink where we stand when we look at actual transformation. I was remarking to one of my friends a couple of weeks back that there is this modern threat of Gnosticism, where we look at any sort of material impact or change that we bring about as to be kept away from, and we are to only concentrate on that which is purely spiritual. And that sort of eats into the way we look at culture, to the point where we think we are not to make any sort of cultural impact in the material world, and that we are only to think purely in spiritual terms. There is that revamped threat of Gnosticism that is, as you mentioned, eating into Protestant theology and the way we look at the world. And you've preemptively answered many of the questions that I would have asked you towards the end, and a very vibrant call for us Indian Christians to look at how we want to see India transformed. Like you said, as William Carey was a friend of India, we too are to be friends of India, as we hearken our fellow brothers from to be sons and heirs to the throne of God, and as we transform the culture and the world that we see around us for God's glory. While we, as we are just about to conclude this very fascinating and interesting conversation, and I also believe a conversation that will galvanize many to carry forward the legacy of William Carey and the others in impacting India for God's glory, what is one final word of advice or admonishment that you would provide to Indian Christians if we are to continue in the steps in the legacy of William Carey?
Well, he was a friend of India at a time when no Indian thought of himself as an Indian. So India is not an Indian term, nor is a Hindu Indian term. It was a Persian term with Sindh River. They couldn't pronounce Sindh so they said Hind. People living around Sindh were Hindus, and their religious ideas were Hinduism. So that's why even Hindutva movement is shying away from the word Hindu, as it is a Persian word, and moving towards Sanatan, which is actually a Buddhist word, but at least it is indigenous. So they're giving up the concept of Hinduism to a concept of Sanatan, but because the India is the idea of India as a geographic area comes from the Latin Bible, where in the book of Esther, the Persian Empire extends up to India, twice in Esther. That is Greek version, Indic, of Hindu. So what is Sindh becomes Hind in Persia, it becomes India in Greek. So European mind is fascinated with the geographic idea of India, because when you've gone to India, you've gone to the end of the Persian Empire. And that's what is driving Columbus, Vasco da Gama. When Vasco da Gama comes to Calicut, nobody in Kerala calls himself Indian. Nobody calls himself Malayali, because Malayalam doesn't exist. So the idea of geographic India spreads with the Bible, but the idea of political nation state, this is a Protestant idea which comes from Judaism. Roman Catholics, Orthodox, they don't have an idea of nation. The Roman Catholics and Orthodox believed in Christendom, Holy Roman Empire. So this is Christendom. But sovereign nations is a Jewish idea. God is giving a territory to Abraham and Moses and Joshua, which they are to govern. So a geographic entity which is being governed under one law. This is a Jewish Protestant idea, which people like William Carey and then his successors bring to India. So India is a creation. In my book, India, the Grand Experiment, I've developed this more. And in other books which are coming, I'm developing it even more. That modern India is a grand experiment envisioned by Victorian Christians. It's a Protestant idea. William Carey believed that as he brings light to India, the word of God, darkness will dispel. Darkness will not overcome. Contemporary Christianity, Protestant Christianity, has become pessimistic that it doesn't matter how much we spread the light, the darkness will keep growing. The world will go from bad to worse. This is a foolish version of Protestant Christianity, which has caused evangelical Christianity is a defeated religion in America. It's a defeated religion in Europe. It is now a defeated religion in India because we have no vision for India. We have no vision that the Word of God can transform India into becoming a great nation. So the necessity for returning to William Carey and understanding how those people who brought the Word of God to India understood the Word of God and actually succeeded in creating the modern world. That's the heart of the message, that it is because of people like William Carey that India received the civil services. 3 days a week, he was training in Fort William College, where civil servants were being trained. In fact, most of the Bible translations were happening in a college for civil servants in Fort William College. The Bibles were printed in Sirampur, but they were translated because how do you teach a civil servant who is going to Kerala? How do you teach him Malayalam? There is no Malayalam. There is no Malayalam literature. You have to create the literature. So Bible is translated into Malayalam so that he can study. He already knows English. He can study Malayalam Bible to learn Malayalam, but also to learn how to govern, how to do justice, how to be righteous. So people like William Carey, while he's translating the Bible, he's creating modern India, translating the Bible into all the languages so that a common worldview is shared. You know, when somebody memorizes 10 Commandments, catechism, and every child is taught to memorize the 10 Commandments, you are forging the soul of the nation, the worldview of the nation. When a child is memorizing the Lord's Prayer, he's learning what does it mean to be a father, what is a family. So in creating modern India, the Bible's ideas, like last Thursday, Dr. Babu Varghese reviewed his new book on compassion and care, the CSR, corporate social responsibility, which has now become part of the legal part of India, that you're making lots of money, 5% of it you donate to your social responsibility, handicapped, etc. This is the gospel's contribution to changing India, that those who have must give to those who are in need. This is true religion, to take care of children and widows and orphans, for orphans and widows. So the gospel is continuing to transform India, even though so many of our preachers are not interested in India. They're not friends of India. They're friends of heaven. They want to take everybody to heaven. They're not interested in transforming, but there is no other force that can transform India and make India a great nation. So this book on the father of modern India, William Carey, is very relevant. We've only touched on few subjects today, but this is the first of the many books that I have written on how the Bible has been impacting India. And India's future is great because India will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea.
Wow, and that is a befitting way to come to a conclusion of this very riveting conversation. And yes, do get hold of the book. The link to access the book on Amazon and elsewhere is there in the description. And you have definitely given us a lot to think on, a lot to re-envision where we stand with regards to India's future in our call and commitment as Indian Christians. And so thank you so much, Dr. Vishal sir, for coming on to the podcast and for sharing insights and thoughts about your fascinating work.
Well, thank you. God bless you and your new little ministry of apologetics. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you all for staying till the very end. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, take care and God bless.